a spear, a sword, an ornament. Long before this river was a highway, a border, a sewer, long before it was disciplined into the Thames we now know, people were putting valuable things into it. Objects that took skill, time, and materials to make. Not simply lost or swept in by chance, but placed there, in the same stretch of water where one of the world's great cities would one day rise. The pattern is striking enough that archaeologists have wondered whether this river was more than just water, more than just a route through the landscape, whether, in ways now partly lost to us, it carried a deeper kind of meaning. What we do know is that this place mattered long before it became a city. Yet before the walls, the bridges and the quays, this was mud, gravel and marsh, difficult ground, shifting ground, the kind of place that swallowed roads and resisted building, not an obvious foundation for anything. So what was it about this awkward, resistant landscape that gave rise to a new city, London? Much of that older world is hard to see now. The smaller rivers are buried. The marshes have been drained. The Thames has been embanked, narrowed, disciplined, and built against. Its natural edges have been turned into walls, roads, and quays. And yet the older landscape has not disappeared. It survives in the fall of streets, in the hidden valleys of buried rivers, in the sudden rise of ground in the city, and the long descent towards the Thames. In the way some routes feel obvious and others feel awkward. A slope, a dip in the land, a street that runs where it does because the ground has been nudging movement that way for centuries. Ludgate Hill, Cornhill, the line of the Walbrook Valley between them, these are not just features of the modern city. They're fragments of an older landscape that help decide where London could take hold. London was not built in a landscape that offered itself easily. It was built in terrain shaped by river, valley, and marsh. Much of what followed was an attempt to tame that ground, work around it, and build upon it. Beneath the modern city, that older ground still survives. Old channels, buried soils, marsh deposits, gravel terraces. Structure rather than scenery. Seen that way, London starts to look different. Less a city that replaced its landscape than one that still contains it. London grew beside a river, but this was not one river with neat banks and a clear edge. It was a much messier world than that. The Thames here was broader, more tidal, and more changeable than the river we know now. Its edges shifted, its banks gave way to marshland. Smaller rivers fed into it from both north and south, cutting folds and valleys into the surrounding land. The ground varied too. Some of it was heavy clay, slow draining and difficult. Some was gravelly and better drained, firmer, drier, easier to cross, easier to build on. In a landscape like this, small differences in ground could mean everything. They could decide where people crossed, where goods were stored, where settlement took hold, and where a path dissolved into mud and water. Along this stretch of the Thames, those gravel terraces mattered enormously. They offered some of the most attractive ground for settlement in an otherwise difficult river landscape. Dry enough to live on, close enough to the water to move, trade, and cross. And the river system itself did not always look as it does now. Parts of the floodplain once carried multiple channels and small islands, and some traces of that older landscape still survive beneath the modern city as buried hollows and former watercourses. So this was not a ready-made city site. It was a landscape of opportunity and constraint, useful in some places, difficult in others, and decisive in where a city could take hold. It would be easy to imagine this as empty ground before the Romans arrived. It was not. People had been moving through the Thames Valley for thousands of years. They hunted here, crossed here, worked here, buried their dead here, and used the river long before Londinium existed. Its importance may simply have taken a different form from the one we instinctively look for. Not a capital or a town, but a crossing place, perhaps a meeting place, a threshold between banks, channels, and islands, a place where the river itself seems to have mattered. Southern Britain was already a world of worked land, rival powers, movement, and exchange. The city did not emerge from wilderness. It emerged from a landscape people already knew how to use. And the river may not have mattered only in practical ways. Those weapons and ornaments in the Thames suggest that this was more than just useful ground. The quantities of Bronze Age metalwork from the river are remarkable enough to suggest a larger possibility, that this part of the Thames was invested with ritual meaning. By the later Iron Age, activity here seems to have intensified. The river was receiving objects, perhaps offerings, in greater variety than ever. Before there was a city here, the river and its banks were already alive with movement and meaning. So why did this stretch of river, rather than another, become the place where a great city emerged? Because here, unusually, several advantages worked together. Unlike further east, where the Thames grew wider and less cooperative, this was the kind of place where people who knew where to tread could get across the river. Close by, above the wetter floodplain, was firmer ground, not perfectly dry or easy land, but gravel terraces where roads, storage, and building were more practical than they were in the marshland. And this was not just a way across the river. It was a point where different kinds of movement could meet. Routes coming down through southern Britain could meet the Thames here. Movement along the river could turn inland or continue down towards the estuary and the channel. No single advantage was enough on its own, but together they made this exactly the sort of opportunity any aspiring conquerors would have taken one look at and thought, yes, this will do. There is no strong evidence for a substantial pre-Roman centre here. Westminster and Southwark show more signs of earlier occupation, especially on the drier islands beside the river, but even there the scale seems modest. So this site may have appealed to Rome not only because of what it had, but because of what it did not. No native capital already there, no obvious centre to inherit, no local power already rooted on the site. That didn't make it empty, but it did make it available. Unlike Roman towns such as Colchester and St Albans, Londinium was not the natural growth of an older settlement. It was a Roman decision made on carefully chosen ground. Rome didn't find a city here, it found the possibility of one. After the invasion of AD 43, Rome needed control more than grandeur. It needed roads, supply lines, communications, and reliable movement across newly conquered territory. It needed a bridge. It needed a place where trade, administration, and logistics could reinforce one another. This site answered those needs. A bridge here would not simply connect two banks, it would bind together roads, river traffic, and provincial power. Goods moving by land and water could be drawn through one place. Troops, officials, and messengers could move more easily. Storage, exchange, and administration could gather around the crossing. But none of that meant the site was easy. This was not a neat, dry platform waiting for a city to be dropped onto it. Before there was a substantial town here, there was work to be done. Timber had to be laid across wet ground. Ditches had to be cut. Gravel had to be dug out and spread. In places, the level had to be raised with dumped refuse, broken pottery, and animal bone. Marshy edges had to be made usable. Before there was a city here, someone had to carry materials onto bad ground and make a road hold where the landscape did not naturally offer one. And it happened in stages. The main western approach road appears to have been built in AD 47 to 48. Major investment in the bridge and waterfront followed in the early 50s. The planned core of the town took shape around those works, not all at once, but through a series of connected developments. The riverfront had to be built too. Landing stages reached out over the foreshore. Quays were pushed into the river. The bank was straightened and reinforced. Warehouses stood close to the bridge. The crossing and the harbour became one connected piece of urban machinery. And whatever role the army played at the very beginning, the early town quickly took on the character of a trading settlement. By the time written history first catches sight of Londinium, it is already, in the words of Tacitus, a place crowded with merchants and merchandise, a town of business, legal transactions, and civilian life, made possible by Roman power and infrastructure. That, in essence, is what Rome did here. It did not invent the landscape, but neither did it simply admire it. It took a useful but awkward riverside site and forced it into coherence, a place where roads, trade, settlement, and authority could hold together. So the city was Roman in its foundation and form, but the possibility of the city lay in a landscape much older than Rome. The city was not simply founded here, it was built into being. Before London was a city, this was already a place where several things met. A tidal river running inland from the sea, gravel terraces above wetter ground, streams and rivers cutting valleys through the basin, a crossing where people and goods came together, a place where river and ground made settlement possible. But it was more than a convenient site. It was a landscape already used by people for thousands of years, a river that carried not only trade and travel, but meaning. Rome did not create that world. It recognized its possibilities and turned them into roads, quays, and streets. London did not begin with a single act of founding. It began when imperial power seized on the opportunities of this landscape, a strategic crossing, a usable river, and a site not yet claimed by a city, and began the long work of turning water, mud, gravel, and tide into a city. That older landscape has not disappeared. It still survives in buried valleys, in the rise and fall of the ground, in the line of the Thames, and in the old gravel terraces at places like Ludgate Hill and Cornhill, where London first found higher, drier ground above the marsh. And in places, the modern city still bears the ghosts of that early Roman labour to tame the land, not only in the ground beneath it, but in streets like Eastcheap and Lombard Street, where London still preserves traces of its first urban pattern. Before London, there was the landscape that made it possible, and that landscape is still making London now.